Despite her pious vocation, a nun indulges herself with the substance and explicit desires, spiraling into horrifying consequences without her knowing. In a confessional, a disheartened priest denies absolution from a nun as she fervently condemns her perpetrator to eternal damnation. In a Catholic geriatric hospital, Sister Gertrude, the supervising nun, walks down the hall to wake the elderly patients. She helps Bachette and Jonathan up, but they take turns teasing the chaste woman, so she reprimands them and leaves. After handing a patient to a nurse, the Baroness asks Gertrude for hot tea in her room. Since the doctor doesn't permit it, the nun disregards the entitled aristocrat's concern and heads to the doctor's office. In the surgery room, Dr. Porret asks Gertrude for a swab and scalpel. Seeing the medical tools, beads of sweat start forming on the trembling nun's face, remembering her brain surgery 7 months ago. The doctor notices Gertrude's anxiousness and refuses to believe she's still suffering from post-operative shock. Despite her successful brain operation, the adamant nun believes her illness has returned and looks for someone to substitute for her. Meanwhile, Sister Mathieu denies her crippled patient Peter's flattering and provocative remarks about her beauty. Then, Gertrude asks her to assist Dr. Porret, claiming she's sick, so Mathieu diligently abides. While changing an isolated patient's IV bag, Gertrude stares in horror at the heaving patient. Reminded by her previous illness, the nun anxiously fidgets with the surgical needle when Dr. Porret sees and takes over. Afterward, Dr. Porret reprimands Gertrude in the hall for her carelessness. Despite her regular checkup, the nun still claims she's sick and refuses to believe the doctor's judgment. To prove her claim, Gertrude lists her supposed symptoms and asks for morphine. In disbelief, Dr. Porret says the substance is not a cure and reiterates that her tumor has been removed, saying her apprehension is all in her mind. Regardless, Gertrude insists on being admitted and leaves to talk to her superior. However, Mother Superior also believes Gertrude as well and disapproves of her request to be hospitalized. When the nun claims her faith is wavering, the Superior advises her to seek help through the confessional. But when Gertrude persists, Mother Superior impatiently ends the call, infuriating the worrisome nun. Meanwhile, Sister Mathieu secretly steals Gertrude's medical files from the archive room. During mealtime, Gertrude reads a graphical text to the elderly patients about martyrdom and details their sufferings in memory. Suddenly, she sees Josephine's dentures on the table while the elderly woman eats. Disgusted, Gertrude reprimands her and destroys the dentures on the ground in a fit of rage. As the patients wail in shock, Josephine cries in her seat. Afterward, Gertrude fervently apologizes and refuses help from the nurses. When Nurse Celine searches Mathieu for help, Peter stops her as they watch the nun burning Gertrude's x-ray files in the bathroom. Later that night, Gertrude wakes Mathieu in worry that everyone hates her. However, the diligent nun ensures that she burned her medical files so no one can refute Gertrude's hysteria. Suddenly, Mathieu professes her passionate love to Gertrude when the telephone rings. As Mathieu answers the call, she informs the disturbed nun that Josephine is in a coma because of her heart condition, so Dr. Porret asks for Gertrude. While the doctor tends to the heaving patient, the nurse informs him of what happens in the dining hall. Dr. Porret orders Gertrude to quickly prepare a heart stimulant, but the nun only exits the room and waits until Josephine takes her last breath. After proclaiming the elderly woman's demise, Dr. Porret blames Gertrude's recklessness. When the doctor exits, the nun orders Celine to inform the chaplain about the dead while she rummages through the old woman's stuff. As Gertrude tells Janet, Josephine's roommate, to close her eyes and pray, the nun finds a diamond ring in the drawer. When the nun reaches her quarters, she laments her actions and refuses to go to the chapel to pray for Josephine. To ease her anxiety, she searches for morphine, but Mathieu tells her Dr. Porret won't prescribe her anymore due to her substance abuse. Hearing this, Gertrude decides to buy it outside using Josephine's ring, claiming it was a gift from her mother. The following day, Gertrude travels to town and changes from her usual white clothes. She enters a pawn shop and shows the diamond ring she's wearing. When she receives the money in exchange for the jewelry, the nun enters a fine restaurant and mistakenly asks for a man as her meal. While waiting, Gertrude smokes as her interest falls in a man at the bar. She looks at him provocatively before he acknowledges her gesture. Without a word, Gertrude exits while the man follows her discreetly into an empty building. Despite vowing for chastity as a woman of God, the nun makes love with the nameless patron. Ecstatic, Gertrude returns to the convent and hides her provocative undergarments in remembrance. She also places a gift from Mathieu beneath her pillow and hides a stack of morphine in her drawer. Soon after, the hospital administrator reprimands Gertrude for her irrational behavior at the dining hall, but the passive nun claims she only answers to Mother Superior. Furthermore, she assures that she'll no longer assist Dr. Perrette, whom she accuses of mismanagement of certain medical cases. Hearing this, the administrator hesitates to heed the nun's request to dismiss the doctor. Eventually, he agrees to discuss it with the board to save the hospital's reputation. Despite her suggestion, Gertrude laments herself for risking Dr. Perrette's career just because she refused to believe she's sick. Guilt-ridden, she injects her substance to calm herself while begging God for absolution. While high on the substance, Gertrude falls and envisions her mother performing her brain surgery. When Jeannot, an elderly patient, finds her convulsing on the floor, he carries her to the bed while the nun hallucinates uncovering a corpse in the mortuary. Suddenly, someone strikes Jeannot with a lamp, which leads to his demise. Then, the perpetrator throws his body out the window as an onlooker exclaims he killed himself. Gertrude hurriedly checks the fallen body and tells the onlookers not to look at the unsightly scene. When the nun returns to her quarters, Mathieu assures her that the others think Jeannot brought it upon himself. Then, Mathieu shows her a bloody veil with Gertrude's initials, vowing to burn it so no one will know the truth. Since she was intoxicated at the time of the incident, Gertrude realizes that she probably killed Jeannot and pushes Mathieu away in distress. After the paramedics take Jeannot's corpse away, Dr. Perrette informs Gertrude that he's been dismissed at the hospital and thanks the nun for her assistance. Despite the unfortunate incident, Gertrude watches the patients and staff enjoy their afternoon in the courtyard. Then, Dr. Perrette's replacement, Dr. Rollins, arrives and introduces himself as the crowd surrounds him. A few minutes later, Gertrude interrupts the commotion and orders Mathieu to organize a group game to occupy the patients. She apologizes to the new doctor for the childish patients, but Dr. Rollins disagrees and excuses himself as Mathieu calls for her. The group invites Gertrude to join them in a truth game where the patients will ask her questions. After answering their ridiculous questions laughingly, Peter turns serious and asks why Gertrude killed Jeannot. Affronted, the nun demands to know what made Peter think such a thing. As the mood sullens, the patients leave, wondering if Jeannot was really killed instead of ending himself. Not long after, a sudden rain pours, so the others hurry back while Gertrude heads to the confessional. Later that night, Gertrude finds Jonathan and Florence, unorderly, fooling around outside. Petrified, the nun watches them in disgust while someone begs pardon for their immoral act at the confessional. Then, the confessor suffocates Jonathan with gloved hands and cotton until he no longer breathes. Suddenly, Gertrude jolts awake from her bed, thinking everyone is against her. While a bare Mathieu comforts her, Gertrude laughs maniacally at her fellow nun for flaunting her body. The following day, Dr. Rollins welcomes Mathieu, who will be replacing Gertrude as his assistant. The loyal nun claims Gertrude has been suffering from headaches since her operation. Dr. Rollins assures he'll examine the sick nun, inadvertently building tension with Mathieu. When the doctor asks about the discrepancies in the medication register, Mathieu beckons the doctor by the window. They see Jonathan's corpse outside, so Dr. Rollins asks the nun to inform the police and the administrator about the incident. As the staff runs through the commotion, Mathieu stares back at Gertrude through the window, believing she's responsible. Soon after, Florence tearfully insists she's not guilty, so Gertrude claims the police will only interrogate her. As the officers escort Florence outside the hospital's premises, the other patients stare accusingly at Gertrude. Moments later, Gertrude leads an excruciating exercise and relentlessly continues exhausting the elderly patients. Infuriated, Dr. Rollins interferes with the senseless nun and orders them to return inside. At the dining hall, the elderly patients wait for Gertrude's permission to eat. After a few minutes of silence, Franklin, a patient, pushes his food away while the others follow suit, expressing their displeasure to the nun. Consequently, Gertrude assumes they're not hungry and makes the starving patients return to their rooms. Later that night, Gertrude leads a prayer for Jonathan's soul in the hallway when she suddenly suffers from a headache. When the lights turn off, Gertrude hears a voice calling her a murderer. Frantic, she escapes the corridor, denying the accusations while Janet sees her. Then, someone hits her head with a metal rod, making her drop unconscious. The following day, the administrator confronts the patients and staff at the dining hall about Gertrude's attack. The Baroness urges Janet to come forward, but Janet insists she didn't see anything about the incident. That afternoon, voices follow Janet down the hallway when gloved hands capture her. Then, the perpetrator starts tormenting the elderly woman in an empty room. Meanwhile, Dr. Rollins visits the administrator in his office, thinking Gertrude is lying about the attack. He questions Dr. Perrette's unjust dismissal and thinks the nun was also responsible for the unexplained killings. However, the administrator denies Gertrude's involvement, revealing he is indebted to her after she discovered and didn't report his son's morphine addiction. Nevertheless, he phones Gertrude to talk to her while the doctor leaves to fetch her. After the administrator's call, Gertrude sees blood on her gloved hands and finds Janet's tormented corpse hanging on the elevator shaft. Distraught, Gertrude panics in her bed, insisting she didn't kill Janet. Regardless, Dr. Rollins prepares a sedative to calm her down. He finds her arm bruised, implying her abuse of morphine, and locks eyes with Mateo, who feigns innocence and comforts Gertrude. As the frantic nun relaxes, Mateo tries to explain the bruises, but the doctor insists on discussing it later. Meanwhile, the administrator leads the police to his office and advises them to work quietly to maintain the hospital's reputation. Seeing the enforcers, Franklin believes justice will be restored, but Peter distrusts the police, thinking the situation will only worsen. When Franklin exits his friend's room, he asks Nurse Celine about the investigation, but the woman only dismisses him. Later that night, Gertrude awakens and finds Mateo asleep, so she quietly exits her quarters and prepares a substance. In Peter's room, he notices someone enter until a gloved hand sedates him. Not long after, Peter wakes up seated on the basement floor, where Gertrude confronts him about her assailant. However, Peter refuses to reveal the perpetrator's identity as he devalues his life. Impatiently, Gertrude takes his crutches away and leaves the patient for the night. Once Peter is alone, he drags his body up the stairs where the nun left his walking aid. Meanwhile, Sister Mateo searches the building for Sister Gertrude as she passes by the oblivious administrator. Without her knowing, Sister Gertrude sees her enter Dr. Roland's office, thinking ill of their secret meeting. Inside the doctor's room, Mateo explains the nun's disappearance, so Dr. Roland claims he'll look for her himself. On the other hand, Sister Gertrude finds her stack of morphine stolen, but then she sees one discarded on the floor and intoxicates herself with it. When Peter reaches his crutches, he smiles at a nun knowingly, but the faceless woman throws away the walking aid and kicks him in the head until he no longer breathes. While Sister Gertrude lies immobile on the floor, Sister Mateo reports Peter's death and the overdosed nun's state to Mother Superior. Not long after, Sister Mateo leads the immoral nun to the car arranged for Sister Gertrude. At the convent, Mother Superior reprimands Gertrude's scandalous behavior. Whether she killed the patients or not, the pious woman will be judged because of her disgraceful acts. In return, Sister Gertrude grabs the crucifix and begs God to prove her innocence. Witnessing her anxiety, Mother Superior calls for the other nuns and orders them to sedate Sister Gertrude in her cell. Meanwhile, Dr. Rollins confronts Sister Mateo about her knowledge of her friend's addiction. The doctor claims she must be interrogated and detained for helping Sister Gertrude. Left with no choice, Mateo grabs the scalpel to end her life. But Dr. Roland stops her, claiming she'll do anything for him. Mateo drops to her knees and seduces the doctor, who reciprocates her advances. In Sister Gertrude's cell, the catatonic nun remembers Geno's death, witnessing Sister Mateo bludgeon the old man, who happens to be the murderous nun's ruthless grandfather. Traumatized by her illicit childhood, Sister Mateo professes her numerous heinous crimes at the confessional without remorse.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.